Greetings and welcome to the introduction to astronomy. In this week's misconception in astronomy, we are going to talk about atoms and whether or not they are the smallest particles. So let's get started here. And are atoms the smallest particles? And of course, the answer to that is no. When we know this, we know that atoms are made up of other particles. So atoms are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. The protons and neutrons are down in the nucleus of the atom, and the electrons are around it in various orbitals. So what do we mean sometimes when we say that atoms are the smallest bits of matter? Well, they are the smallest that have those specific unique chemical properties. And if you subdivide them, you change that. So an atom defines exactly what it is in terms of whether it is iron or whether it is uranium or whether it is helium. So the properties of the atom define that in terms of chemical reactions. So what is smaller than this? Well, let's take a look. And what we can see is that there are actually other things. And in fact, protons and neutrons are made up of quarks. Now quarks come in several different flavors. So the terminology for the different types in particle physics is flavors. And there are U's, D's, which are the standard ones and make up the ordinary matter that we see. And then there are other types of quarks, the S, C's, T's, and B's, that are different types. So let's look primarily at the up and down quarks. And these are what make up the matter that we see in the universe. So a proton, for example, has two up quarks and a down quark. So those three particles bound together are what make up a proton. Now you may remember that a proton has a +1 charge. Well, quarks have fractional charges. So an up quark has a charge of 2/3 and a down quark has a charge of -1/3. And if we add those up, if we add 2/3 and 2/3, we get 4/3. We subtract 1/3, and that gives us 3/3 or 1. It gives us the positive individual charge of a proton of +1. But because we defined the charge based on particles that were not the tiniest bits of matter, we end up with fractional charges when we get down to those much smaller bits. Now let's take a look at the different types of quarks that there are. And what we see here is these are the various different types of quarks that we can look at. So again, our primary matter is made up of these very first two right here, which are the up and down quarks. The other ones are strange and charmed and the top and bottom quark, which have potentially more and more energy as you work your way toward the right across the table there. And those are the particles again that make up everything else. Now we also have other particles included here, and you'll see the electron, which is a different type of material than a quark, but is also, as far as we know, the tiniest bit of matter that exists. So here we're seeing those tiny bits of matter that are the individual smallest things that we know of. And then on the right hand side would be those objects that carry the forces between them. So those things that keep things like quarks bound together. Now the question is then, are the quarks composed of anything smaller? And at this point, we really don't know for sure. It's thought at this point that the quarks are the smallest bits of elementary matter that make up everything else in the universe. But perhaps there is something else that actually composes the quarks and makes up those that could be determined at some point in the future. So let's go ahead and finish up with our summary here. And what we've looked at today is, first of all, that atoms we know are made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But the protons and neutrons here are made up of quarks. So they actually are made up of even smaller particles. And at the current level of understanding, we believe that quarks are the fundamental component of the matter that we see in the universe. And that is specifically the up and down quarks that make up the matter that we see. So that concludes this misconception in astronomy on atoms being the smallest bits of material. We'll be back again next week for another misconception in astronomy. So until then, have a great day, everyone, and I will see you in class.